It was just another busy evening at Jerry's Diner, where the smell of fresh coffee and grilled burgers filled the air. Michelle had just finished her 6-hour shift, her feet aching from running between tables. The 17-year-old pulled her dark hair into a messy ponytail as she counted her tips. $87. Not bad for a Thursday. Every dollar counted towards her college fund, though a good chunk of her earnings still went to maintaining her prized possession. A slightly beat-up 2012 Honda Civic. The car wasn't much to look at, with its fading silver paint and a small dent in the rear bumper. But to Michelle, it represented 2 years of saved paychecks, countless overtime shifts, and the sweet taste of independence. She'd bought it 3 months ago, and the feeling of holding those keys for the first time still brought a smile to her face. The autumn wind carried a slight chill as she pushed open the diner's back door, waving goodbye to her coworker Raj behind the counter. The parking lot lights cast long shadows across the cracked asphalt, and the distant rumble of motorcycles caught her attention. A group of bikers had gathered near the far end of the lot, their leather jackets reflecting the dim orange glow of the street lamps. Michelle didn't think much of it. The diner was just off the highway, and they often got all sorts of customers, from truckers to motorcycle groups. She'd served enough of them to know most were just regular folks who happened to love riding. Still, her mom's voice echoed in her head, always reminding her to stay alert in parking lots at night. Fishing through her worn backpack, she found her car keys buried beneath her biology textbook and half-finished homework assignments. The day's events played through her mind. The pop quiz in chemistry she was pretty sure she aced. The funny story her best friend Lily told at lunch about her disastrous driving lesson. And the kind elderly couple who'd left her an extra generous tip after she helped clean up their grandson's spilled milkshake. The Honda's headlights blinked in response to her key fob, and she could already picture herself at home, curled up on the couch, maybe watching that new Netflix show everyone had been talking about. Her younger brother would probably be hogging the TV playing video games, but maybe she could convince him to switch over with the promise of sharing her leftover diner fries. As she approached her car, she noticed more bikes pulling into the lot. These riders were different from the first group. Their bikes were newer, shinier, and their leather vests displayed patches she didn't recognize. They moved with purpose, some parking their motorcycles in a way that seemed almost strategic, though Michelle couldn't say exactly why that thought crossed her mind. She was just a few steps from her car when she heard the distinct sound of boots on pavement behind her. The sound wasn't hurried or aggressive, just steady, deliberate steps that seemed to be getting closer. The evening suddenly felt cooler, and the distance to her car door seemed to stretch longer than it should have. That's when she heard a deep voice call out, "Hey there." "Hold up a second." The voice wasn't threatening. If anything, it sounded almost friendly, like someone about to ask for directions. But something in Michelle's gut told her this wasn't going to be a simple conversation about the nearest gas station or how to get to the highway. Her hand tightened around her keys as she turned slightly, catching sight of a tall figure in her peripheral vision. The events that would unfold in the next few minutes would completely change how she viewed her safety, her community, and the sometimes misleading nature of first impressions. But in that moment, standing in the dim light of the parking lot, she had no way of knowing that this seemingly ordinary Thursday evening was about to become anything but ordinary. The tall biker approached Michelle's car, his heavy boots crunching against loose gravel in the parking lot. He was built like a football player, with broad shoulders underneath his leather vest, but what caught her attention most was his neatly trimmed gray beard and the kind wrinkles around his eyes. He looked more like someone's grandfather than a threatening figure, but Michelle's heart still raced as she remembered all those safety videos they'd watched in school. "Sorry to bother you," he said, his voice carrying a gentle rumble that reminded her of her Uncle Tom. "But I noticed something wrong with your car when you pulled in earlier." He gestured toward the back of her Honda, keeping a respectful distance that somehow made her even more nervous. Why was he being so polite if something was wrong? Michelle's mind raced through possibilities. She'd just had the car checked last month, spending a good portion of her savings on maintenance. The mechanic had given everything a clean bill of health. Could something have gone wrong since then? She couldn't afford another repair, not with college application fees coming up. Your taillight, the biker continued, pointing specifically now. It's out on the driver's side. Pretty dangerous to drive like that, especially at night. He pulled out his phone, apparently to use as a flashlight. Want to take a quick look? It might just be a loose connection. Everything she'd learned about parking lot safety screamed at her not to get out of the car, but another part of her brain reasoned that the diner's windows were right there, with Raj and other customers clearly visible inside. The biker seemed genuine, and if her taillight was really out, she could get a ticket. Her parents would definitely not be happy about that. While she debated what to do, she noticed two more bikers had walked up, flanking the first one. They were younger, probably in their 30s, both wearing similar vests with patches she couldn't quite make out in the dim light. One was holding what looked like a camera phone, which struck her as odd. I should probably just have my dad check it when I get home, Michelle said, her voice coming out steadier than she felt. Her hand was already reaching for the car door handle. They'll just take a second, the younger biker with the phone said, his tone friendly but somehow more insistent. Better safe than sorry, right? Against her better judgment, Michelle found herself stepping out of the car. The cool evening air hit her face as she took 2 careful steps toward the back of her Honda, keeping the bikers in her peripheral vision. That's when she heard it, the subtle click of her car door opening again behind her. Before she could fully turn around, someone had slipped into the driver's seat. Her keys were still in her hand, but she'd hit the unlock button when she'd gotten out. The engine roared to life, and for a moment, time seemed to stop. Her backpack was in there, her phone, the textbooks she'd need for tomorrow's classes, everything. The older biker hadn't moved, but now he was definitely recording with his phone. The other two stood perfectly still, watching her reaction. Michelle's mind went blank, then kicked into overdrive. Should she scream? Run back to the diner? Try to stop the car somehow? But something wasn't quite right about this situation. The bikers weren't running to their motorcycles. They weren't trying to stop her from moving. They were just watching, recording, waiting. It was almost as if they were expecting something specific to happen. The car began to pull away slowly, almost cautiously, and Michelle felt her heart pounding in her ears. But as she opened her mouth to shout for help, the older biker's expression changed into something unexpected. Not menace or triumph, but what looked almost like approval. And that, he said calmly, still recording, is exactly how quickly it can happen. But don't worry, this isn't what you think it is. We're about to teach you something that could save your life one day. Michelle stood frozen in the parking lot, watching her silver Honda pull away. Her mind struggled to process what the older biker had just said. What did he mean? This wasn't what she thought. The car was literally being driven away right in front of her. She could feel her chest tightening, her breathing getting shallow. 2 years of savings gone in seconds. Then something strange happened. Instead of speeding off towards the highway, her car made a slow, careful turn at the end of the parking lot. It moved at what seemed like barely above walking speed, its brake lights glowing softly in the growing darkness. The driver was being careful. I know you're scared right now, the older biker said, lowering his phone slightly. But I promised you, your car isn't being stolen. We're the Guardian Road Knights, and we do safety awareness demonstrations at schools and community centers. Tonight, you're getting a private lesson that could save your life. Michelle's fear began mixing with confusion. She glanced toward the diner windows, where she could see Raj watching intently. But instead of looking alarmed, he was smiling and nodding. That's when she noticed the police car parked quietly in the shadows near the diner's entrance. Had it been there the whole time? Look at your hand, the younger biker suggested gently. Michelle looked down. She was still clutching her keys tightly, her knuckles white from the grip. You had your keys the whole time, but the car still got taken. Want to know why that doesn't matter anymore? Her Honda was now completing its circle of the parking lot, moving at the same cautious pace. The headlights illuminated each parking space it passed, creating a slow-motion light show that felt surreal against the backdrop of her pounding heart. Most modern cars, the older biker explained, his tone shifting to something more educational, can be driven for quite a while even after you take the keys away. All someone needs is for you to unlock it once and start it once. After that, they could drive for hours before needing to restart the engine. The third biker, who had been quiet until now, added, "We're doing this video series to show young drivers what can happen when you leave your car, even for a few seconds. The most common trick is exactly what we just did. Someone tells you there's something wrong with your car, gets you to step out to check, and then..." Michelle's racing thoughts began to slow as understanding dawned. She noticed other details now. The patches on their vests showed a motorcycle with angel wings, not the scary symbols she'd expected. The older biker had a small pin on his collar that read, "Certified Safety Instructor." Even their positions around her didn't feel threatening anymore. They had maintained a clear path to the diner door the whole time. Her car was getting closer now, moving back toward its original parking space. Through the windshield, she could see the driver was wearing a similar vest to the others. His expression was focused, professional, nothing like what she'd expect from a real car thief. But why me? Michelle finally found her voice. Why tonight? The older biker smiled warmly. "We watch for young drivers, especially ones who work late shifts. We've been doing demonstrations at the high school, but some lessons hit harder when they're unexpected. When we saw you walking to your car alone, checking your phone, not really looking around, well, you fit the profile of someone who needed this wake-up call." Just then, a female police officer stepped out of the patrol car and began walking toward them. She was carrying what looked like some kind of information packet, and her face held the same friendly but serious expression as the biker's. Ready to learn how to make sure this never happens for real. The officer called out as Michelle's car came to a perfect stop in its original space. "Because these guys are about to show you some tricks that even most cops don't know about." The driver of Michelle's car stepped out and handed her back her keys with a polite nod. He was younger than the others, probably in his mid-20s, with neat dark hair and a friendly smile that helped ease her still racing heart. "Your car's exactly how we found it," he said. "We even adjusted your seat back to where it was." The police officer, whose nameplate read Officer Chen, pulled up a folding chair from near her patrol car. "Let's sit down for a minute," she suggested, setting up the chair near Michelle's car. "What you just experienced. We see it happen for real at least twice a month in this area alone. Except those stories don't have happy endings." Michelle sank into the offered chair, her legs finally giving in to their shakiness. The night air had grown cooler, and one of the bikers respectfully draped a clean motorcycle jacket over her shoulders. The leather was warm and surprisingly comforting. "First things first," the older biker said, pulling out what looked like a small tablet. "We caught your reaction on video. Would you mind watching it? Sometimes seeing yourself in these situations can be the best teacher." Michelle nodded, still trying to process everything that had happened. The tablet showed her walking to her car, the brief conversation, her moment of hesitation, and then that fatal step away from the driver's door. Watching it now, from the outside, she could see all the warning signs she'd missed. Her heart sank as she watched herself look down at the supposed taillight problem, completely turning her back on her running car. "You actually did better than most people," Officer Chen commented, pointing at the screen. "See how you hesitated. Your instincts were trying to tell you something. But then social pressure kicked in, right? You didn't want to seem rude or paranoid." The youngest biker, who'd driven her car, spoke up. "I used to work as a security consultant for shopping malls," he explained. "The number one thing criminals count on is people being too polite to trust their gut. They use our good manners against us. Now, the older biker said, pulling out some papers from his vest pocket, "Let me show you what those patches on our jackets really mean." He spread out several certificates on the hood of her car. There were teaching credentials, security certifications, and even letters from local schools thanking them for their safety programs. "We're all certified instructors," Officer Chen added. "These guys might look tough, but they spend their weekends teaching self-defense classes and running safety workshops. They're basically teddy bears on motorcycles." This got a chuckle from the group, breaking some of the remaining tension. The tablet was now showing other scenarios, different parking lots, different situations, but always the same quick theft technique. Michelle leaned forward, completely absorbed. In one clip, someone pretended to be having car trouble and asked for help. In another, they claimed to have hit the person's car and wanted to check for damage. "The trick that was used on you," the older biker explained, "that's called the Good Samaritan trap. They count on young people wanting to help or at least not wanting to seem rude. But here's the thing. No legitimate person will ever ask you to get out of your car in a parking lot at night. Not a real police officer, not a concerned citizen, not even a mechanic." Officer Chen nodded in agreement. "Even if I pull you over, I'll always tell you to stay in your car unless there's a safety reason to exit. And I'll never ask you to check anything on your vehicle. That's my job." The group of bikers had formed a loose circle around Michelle's car, but now she noticed how they were positioned. They were actually keeping watch, scanning the parking lot, making sure their impromptu safety lesson wasn't interrupted. They moved with the smooth efficiency of people who'd done this many times before. "Ready to learn some real tricks?" the younger biker asked, pulling out a set of small devices from a backpack. "We're going to show you how to turn your car into a fortress. And trust me, what we're about to teach you isn't something you'll find in any driver's ed class." The younger biker spread out several small devices on the Honda's hood, each one looking like something from a spy movie. "These are all legal, everyday items that could save your life," he explained, picking up what looked like a tiny black button. "This is a magnetic GPS tracker. Costs about $20 online. Bad guys stick these under your car in parking lots, then follow you home later." Michelle felt a chill run down her spine that had nothing to do with the night air. "They really do that?" she asked, pulling the borrowed motorcycle jacket tighter around her shoulders. "More often than you'd think," Officer Chen said, pulling out her flashlight. "Here, let me show you something." She lay down on the ground next to Michelle's car and shined the light underneath. "See these spots? The dark metal areas? Those are perfect hiding spots for trackers. Every time you get in your car, you should do a quick check of these spots." The older biker nodded approvingly. "But that's just the beginning. Watch this." He pulled out his phone and opened what looked like a regular map app. "Free safety tip. Never use your real home address in your GPS. Instead, pick a nearby public place, like a grocery store. That way, if someone gets into your car, they won't instantly have your home address." Michelle thought about her own phone's navigation history with a sinking feeling. Every trip to and from home was saved there, easily accessible to anyone who got their hands on her phone. The youngest biker continued the lesson, demonstrating a small motion sensor that could stick to her window. "This makes a loud chirp if anyone gets too close to your car while you're parked. Great for when you're studying late at the library or working evening shifts." As they moved around the car, each safety tip felt more valuable than the last. They showed her how to check if someone had tampered with her doors, how to spot signs that her car had been marked by thieves, and even how to use her key fob as an alarm in an emergency. "Your key fob's panic button works from further away than you think," the older biker explained. "And here's a trick. If you sleep with your keys on your nightstand and you hear something suspicious, hit that panic button. Your car's alarm will go off, and most bad guys will run rather than risk the attention." Officer Chen jumped in with her own tips, showing Michelle how to properly angle her side mirrors to eliminate blind spots and create a wider view of her surroundings. Most people position their mirrors to see their own car, she explained. But that just creates dead zones that someone could hide in. The practical demonstrations continued, with each tip more interesting than the last. They showed her how to use her phone's camera to quickly document suspicious vehicles, how to create a simple code system with family members for emergencies, and even how to use basic items in her car as self-defense tools if needed. Your car's owner's manual, the younger biker said, pulling it from the glove compartment, is actually a great self-defense tool. It's heavy, hard, and nobody expects it. Plus, having it in your hand looks totally natural when you're near your car. What impressed Michelle most was how the bikers made everything feel practical and non-threatening. There was no fear-mongering, just simple, straightforward advice that made perfect sense. They even added humor to keep things light, sharing funny stories about times their own safety measures had caused false alarms. The key, the older biker said, watching Michelle practice checking under her car with the flashlight, is to make safety a habit, not a fear. We're not teaching you to be scared. We're teaching you to be prepared. Officer Chen smiled as Michelle successfully spotted the practiced GPS tracker they'd hidden. See? You're already getting good at this, ready to learn some advanced tricks. Wait until you see what these guys can teach you about using your smartphone as a security system. Your smartphone is probably the most powerful safety tool you own, the younger biker said, pulling out his own phone. But most people don't even use 10% of its safety features. He gestured for Michelle to take out her phone, which was still warm from being in her backpack in the car. The parking lot had grown quieter now, with only the occasional sound of cars passing on the nearby highway. The diner's lights cast a warm glow over their impromptu classroom, and the smell of fresh coffee drifted out whenever the door opened. A few curious customers had gathered at the windows to watch, but the bikers kept their lesson focused and professional. First thing, Officer Chen said, pointing to Michelle's phone settings, let's set up your emergency contacts properly. Most people just put in phone numbers, but there's so much more you can do. She showed Michelle how to add specific medical information, blood type, and allergies, all accessible from the lock screen in an emergency. The older biker chimed in. Now, here's a trick most people don't know about. You can set up your phone to send an automatic alert with your location if you haven't moved for a certain amount of time. Perfect for late-night walks to your car or solo hiking trips. Michelle's eyes widened as they walked her through various apps and settings she'd never known existed. They showed her how to set up fake calls that looked real, how to quickly share her location with trusted contacts, and even how to turn her phone's flash into a safety strobe light. Watch this, the youngest biker said, demonstrating a particular series of button presses. If you hit your power button 5 times quickly, it silently alerts emergency contacts and starts recording video. No one around you would even know you've done it. They moved on to showing her apps that could track her walking route and alert friends if she deviated from her usual path. The best part, Officer Chen explained, is that these are all free features. You don't need to buy anything expensive. The group had formed a comfortable circle under the parking lot lights, with Michelle trying each new technique as they taught it. The bikers' initial intimidating presence had completely transformed. They were like tech-savvy uncles sharing family secrets. Here's another cool trick, the older biker said, showing her how to use her phone's compass and level features. If you're ever in a parking garage and can't remember where you parked, take a picture of the nearby pillars. They usually have section numbers, and your phone automatically saves the location data. Michelle was particularly impressed by the dashboard camera app they recommended. It doesn't just record while you're driving, the younger biker explained. It can also detect if someone bumps your car while you're parked and start recording automatically. As they worked through each new feature, the bikers shared real stories of how these tools had helped people. There was the college student who avoided a potential stalker using the fake call feature, and the teenager who helped catch a serial car thief thanks to a well-placed phone camera. The best safety tool, Officer Chen reminded them, is the one you'll actually use. That's why we focus on simple, everyday features that don't require you to change your routine too much. They showed Michelle how to test each feature, making sure she could activate them quickly without looking at her phone. The practice scenarios they created were practical and realistic. Walking to her car after a late shift, stopping for gas at night, or studying alone in a public place. Remember, the older biker said as Michelle successfully completed another practice scenario, technology is great, but it's just a tool. Your best defense is still awareness and trust your gut. Your phone is there to back you up, not replace your instincts. The lesson wrapped up with one final demonstration: how to turn her phone into an emergency beacon that could be seen from far away. As Michelle activated the strobe feature, the bright flashing light illuminated the surprised and impressed faces of the diner customers still watching from the windows. Ready to learn how to put all these tools together into a complete safety system? The younger biker asked, reaching for his backpack again. Because what we're about to show you next ties everything together. A safety system is like a chain, the older biker explained, spreading out a simple diagram on the hood of Michelle's car. Each thing we've taught you is a link, but they're much stronger when connected. The paper showed a flowchart of different scenarios, with arrows connecting various responses and actions. The night had grown cooler, and more cars had pulled into the diner's parking lot. A few people who'd been watching through the windows had come outside, keeping a respectful distance, but clearly interested in the lesson. Michelle noticed one mother pointing things out to her teenage daughter, both of them taking notes on their phones. Let's put it all together, Officer Chen suggested, pulling out some index cards. We're going to run through some real-world situations, and you'll show us how to use everything you've learned. She handed the cards to the younger biker, who shuffled them with a smile. The first scenario was simple: walking to your car after a late shift. Michelle took a deep breath and began demonstrating. First, I'd have my keys ready before leaving the building, she started, growing more confident as she spoke. Phone in hand, emergency contact screen open, and I'd use the camera to scan the parking lot before stepping out. The older biker nodded approvingly. Good. What else? I'd use the reflection in the windows to check if anyone's following me, Michelle continued, pointing to the diner's large windows. And I'd have my phone set to make that emergency call if I tap it 5 times. They moved through more scenarios, each one slightly more complex than the last. The bikers added unexpected twists. A dark parking lot with broken lights, a stranger asking for directions, a car following too closely on a quiet road. For each situation, Michelle combined different tools and techniques they'd taught her. See how it all flows together? The youngest biker asked, demonstrating how one safety measure naturally led to another. If something feels off, you start with basic awareness, then add layers of protection as needed. Officer Chen shared a story about a young woman who'd used similar techniques to avoid a dangerous situation. She noticed someone following her car one night, the officer explained. Instead of panicking, she used everything we've talked about, called a friend on speaker, drove to a police station, and had her dash cam recording the whole time. The practical demonstrations continued, with each biker adding personal experiences and real-world examples. They showed Michelle how to create a safety web, a network of trusted locations, people, and resources she could rely on in different situations. Your car's not just transportation, the older biker explained, walking around the Honda. It's a mobile safe zone, but only if you use it right. He showed her how to approach her car safely, how to use its features defensively, and how to make quick decisions in unexpected situations. The growing audience of diner customers added an unexpected element to the lesson. People shared their own experiences and asked questions, turning the parking lot into an impromptu community safety workshop. The bikers handled each question professionally, always bringing the focus back to practical, realistic solutions. The best part about everything we've shown you, the younger biker said, helping Michelle practice a particularly clever phone trick, is that it works anywhere. These aren't just parking lot safety tips, they're life safety tips. Michelle's confidence grew with each successful practice scenario. The fear from earlier in the evening had transformed into something else, a quiet, capable awareness that felt natural rather than paranoid. She found herself spotting potential issues before the bikers even pointed them out. "You're getting it," Officer Chen said proudly as Michelle smoothly handled another surprise scenario. "See how you're not jumping at shadows, but you're not ignoring them either. That's exactly where you want to be." The older biker checked his watch and smiled. "Ready for the final test? Because what comes next will put everything you've learned to the test in a way you'll never forget." "Final test time," the older biker announced, gathering everyone around. "With your permission, we're going to create 3 real-world scenarios right here in the parking lot. You'll use everything you've learned tonight to handle them." His eyes twinkled with excitement as he looked at Michelle. "Think you're ready?" The diner's parking lot had become an unexpected classroom, with the gathered crowd now forming a loose circle around the practice area. The night air was crisp, and the street lights cast long shadows across the pavement. Even some of the diner staff had stepped outside during their breaks to watch. "For safety and learning purposes," Officer Chen explained, "I'll be right here the whole time. None of these scenarios will put you in any real danger, but they'll feel very real." She pulled out her notebook. "We'll score how well you handle each situation." The first scenario started without warning. As Michelle walked to her car, one of the younger bikers approached her, asking for directions to the highway. He was friendly and polite, but kept trying to get closer than comfortable. The crowd watched intently as Michelle handled the situation. "Perfect." The older biker called out as Michelle demonstrated exactly what they'd taught her. She kept a safe distance, stayed aware of her surroundings, and used her phone's reflection to check for other people nearby. She'd also positioned herself so the diner's windows were always in view. But now it gets trickier. The younger biker grinned, setting up the second scenario. This time, Michelle had to deal with 2 situations at once: a suspicious person lurking near her car and a seemingly innocent request for help from someone else. The growing crowd of spectators added an extra layer of realism to the scenarios. Some people had their phones out, recording the demonstrations for their own safety education. A group of teenage girls watched especially intently, nodding and whispering among themselves as Michelle showed how to handle each situation. "Notice how she's using her environment," Officer Chen pointed out to the audience. "The reflective surfaces, the lighting, the proximity to safe spaces. She's putting it all together." The officer's commentary helped everyone understand the practical applications of each safety technique. The final scenario was the most challenging. The bikers created a situation where Michelle had to get to her car while dealing with multiple distractions and potential threats. They wanted to see if she could maintain awareness while handling several things at once. "Remember," the older biker called out, "use everything you've learned. Your phone, your surroundings, your instincts. They're all tools in your safety toolkit." Michelle moved through the scenario with growing confidence. She demonstrated how to use her phone's safety features without looking obvious, how to maintain awareness while appearing casual, and how to position herself strategically in relation to potential threats. The crowd broke into spontaneous applause when she successfully completed the final test. Even some truck drivers who had pulled into the lot for coffee breaks joined in, clearly impressed by the practical nature of the demonstrations. "That right there," the older biker announced to everyone, "is how you handle yourself in the real world. No panic, no paranoia, just smart, practical awareness." He turned to Michelle with pride. "You've taken everything we taught you and made it your own." Officer Chen added her own praise. "What's really impressive is how natural you made it look. That's the goal. Safety should become second nature, not something that makes you anxious or scared." The younger bikers started packing up their demonstration materials, but the learning wasn't quite over. The older biker had one more surprise in store. "Now," he said with a smile, "how would you like to help us teach these same skills to others? Because what comes next could help keep a lot more people safe." The parking lot had transformed from a place of fear earlier in the evening to a space of empowerment and community learning. As the crowd continued to watch and learn, it was clear that this night would have lasting impact far beyond just one person's safety education. 3 weeks after that transformative night in the diner parking lot, Michelle stood in front of her school's packed auditorium. The same bikers who had taught her were seated in the back row, giving her encouraging nods as she shared her story with hundreds of fellow students. "I thought I was about to lose my car that night," she began, her voice steady and confident. "Instead, I gained something much more valuable: knowledge that could save lives." The screen behind her showed clips from that evening, carefully edited to highlight the safety lessons without causing fear. The Guardian Road Knights had turned her experience into the first episode of their new safety awareness series. The video had already reached over 1 million views online, with comments pouring in from people sharing their own stories and thanking them for the practical advice. "The best part is how simple these safety tips are," Michelle explained to her attentive audience. She demonstrated some of the phone techniques she'd learned, earning surprised murmurs when she showed how everyday apps could become safety tools. "You probably have most of these features on your phone right now. You just didn't know they were there." In the weeks since that night, things had changed in noticeable ways around town. The diner had installed better lighting in its parking lot and started offering escorts to employees' cars during late shifts. Other businesses had followed suit, creating a ripple effect of improved safety measures throughout the community. Officer Chen, who had become a regular visitor to these presentations, stepped up to share some encouraging statistics. Reports of parking lot incidents had dropped significantly since they'd started their awareness campaign. More importantly, people were getting better at preventing dangerous situations before they could develop. "It's not about living in fear," Michelle explained, echoing what the bikers had taught her. "It's about living smart." She clicked to the next slide, showing a series of simple diagrams. "These are what I call safety maps, ways to plan your daily routine that keep you safer without making you paranoid." The older biker stood up to share some news that brought excited whispers from the crowd. Their safety awareness program had caught the attention of several national organizations. Plans were in the works to expand their teachings to other cities, with Michelle's story serving as the catalyst for a broader movement. But the real change, Michelle continued, happens one person at a time. She pointed to where her younger brother sat in the front row. After learning about car safety, he'd started a school club focused on teaching basic self-defense and awareness skills to younger students. The club had quickly become one of the most popular after-school activities. The presentation wrapped up with a practical demonstration. Student volunteers came up to practice the techniques, each success building confidence in the room. The bikers moved through the crowd, offering tips and answering questions, their once intimidating presence now a source of comfort and knowledge. "Remember," Michelle concluded, "that night could have gone very differently. But because these people cared enough to teach instead of just scare, we're all safer now." She gestured to the bikers, Officer Chen, and even some of the diner staff who had come to support the presentation. As the applause filled the auditorium, Michelle caught sight of something that made her smile. Several students were already downloading the safety apps they discussed, while others were forming groups to practice the techniques during lunch breaks. The knowledge was spreading, growing, evolving. The Guardian Road Knights had scheduled similar presentations at schools across the state. Their simple message, that safety comes from knowledge and awareness, not fear, was reaching more people every day. And it had all started with one unexpected lesson in a diner parking lot. "So the next time you see a group of bikers," Michelle said with a grin, "remember, they might just be your guardian angels in disguise." The audience laughed, but the message was clear. Safety wasn't about looking tough or being scared. It was about being smart, being prepared, and most importantly, sharing what you'd learned with others.